Morning. So this morning it's always tough to have the keynote after the party, but let's see how it goes. So this morning I woke up with a pinched nerve in my shoulder, so if I move like a robot, that's why. How many people know Drupal? All right, almost everyone. I can go home now. Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for the invitation to keynotes. I was going to talk a little bit about open source and content management and one of the big trends that we see, which is the move from content management or traditional content management to digital experience management. And so I hope to keep it a little bit light as it's a keynote. So with that, I'll make some fun of myself. But this is me in 2001 in my dorm room where I started Drupal. And as you can see, I was your typical geek. I had some assembly books, a chessboard, I had a collection of stamps, and of course, lots of Acquia furniture, and I still do. But I started Drupal as a forum, actually, as a discussion forum, as a way to learn about some new technologies. And I never really anticipated to start a large open source project. I was honestly expecting about 10 people or so to use my software. And so, fast forward 13 years, and now Drupal is being used by, over 2% of all the websites online. And so we have a very large community, thousands of contributors. Actually, we're working on Drupal 8 right now, which is the next major version of Drupal, and we've already accepted patches from over 2,000 people. So we have a lot of people to our website. For some reason, we attract more than 2 million unique visitors to our website, which is pretty remarkable given that it's a pretty boring website by all standards. We just talk about code and these kinds of things. So it's not like there's interesting tidbits to be found there. But what I love about open source, and what I love about open source companies, like Acquia, like Alfresco, and others, is that we are able to do well and do good. And that's really sort of a theme that I tried to put central in my life. And so what I mean by that is that, we're here making money, right? Doing well for our employees, yet at the same time, we also give back a lot of software. And that software really helps other organizations fulfill their mission, whether they pay us or whether they don't pay us. Thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of websites use Drupal to better fulfill their mission. And so I've just one quick example about that, and that's We the People. So as Jeff mentioned, whitehouse.gov runs on Drupal, and We the People. How many people know We the People? All right, like a bunch of people. So this is also built in Drupal. It's a subsite of of the White House website. And what's pretty cool about this is that they actually built like a petition system. And so everybody can create a petition, and then other people can sign the petition. And the Obama administration, they promised to provide an official government reply if a petition reaches a number of signatures. And so at first they had like 15,000 signatures. I think right now you have to like 200,000 signatures because of the success. And there's been all sorts of great petitions. But I think it's a great example of how governments are using technology and open source to really do a better job fulfilling their mission, which is to interact with citizens. And so one of the petitions I wanted to show you, it's actually pretty funny. So somebody petitioned that the government should build the Death Star. How many of you have seen that? All right, a lot of you. But anyway, so they got like all the votes that they needed, and of course now the administration needed to provide a reply. And so they gave the reply, and they said, the construction of the Death Star has been estimated to cost more than 850 trillion bazillion dollars, and we're working hard to reduce the deficit, not to expand it. I think that's a good one. And then they said, the administration does not support blowing up planets. And this one is my favorite. They said, why would we build this if it costs so much money and it can be destroyed by basically a one-man starship? And so this is what the government replied. And so in many ways, open source, we saved the world. Like without open source, this might not have happened. In fact, I think we saved the universe. So it's a great example of do well and do good, right? We made some money building these sites, and we also saved the universe. And of course, the internet wouldn't be the internet if somebody, just in case the Death Star got built anyway, they decided to crowdsource or crowdfund building a X-Wing to destroy the Death Star. So it was pretty awesome. But the key here is, if you look at websites, like whitehouse.gov and like many others, like 10 years ago, these websites were all about just publishing content, very unidirectional. Nowadays, it's not just about publishing content anymore. Like what's happening is that a lot of organizations are moving the core of their business to the web. Whether it's engaging with citizens as a government, whether it's raising donations as a nonprofit, let's say, or whether it's educating students at schools or universities. Like it's much more than just putting some information online. It's like having a participation, building communities, like forums at alfresco.com. Or for many, it's all about driving a transaction, like a e-commerce transaction. So what's really happening, like I think we talk a lot about different trends, like open source and cloud and mobile. And in my mind, the trend that wraps around all of these other trends in a way is the fact that digital is at the heart of every business nowadays, or it's getting to the heart of every business, right? And I think that We the People is a great example of that, because the right to petition your government is actually, it's in the First Amendment of the Constitution. So it's like a fundamental right of every American citizen. And before We the People, like, how would you even petition your government? I don't know, like probably write a letter, right? And it seems such a stupid way to petition, like to exercise a fundamental right. And so moving that right to a website that works on mobile and you can petition, on the fly, wherever you are, in the context that you're in, seems like a no-brainer. So it's just one example, but it's happening, all over the place. So it's all about providing users the right content at the right place at the right time. And so to bring the core of a business to digital, I think it's all about context. And we actually have some really good examples. I think Amazon is an amazing example. It's one of the largest American businesses, or one of the largest companies in the world, and they're all digital, right? And one of the reasons they're so successful is because they really understand context. Like when you go to their website, they make you recommendations based on past things that you bought or things that you clicked. And so they really, really understand context. And they also try to get context from other people, like reviews and ratings and price comparisons. Like all of these things, which were never possible in sort of the normal world, I guess, have been enabled in the digital world by leveraging context. Netflix, also disruptive company. One of the reasons they're successful is also because they do recommendations. Like they try to learn and provide context. And in fact, they're so obsessed with getting the context right and giving people the right recommendations that they wrote a check. They had a contest, like we'll give $1 million, they said, to whichever organization or individual that can improve our recommendation engine the most. And so people worked at it, and I think somebody was able to improve it by 3 or 4%, so a pretty small change in a way. And so they wrote the check. They gave that organization $1 million because it pays back for them, right? So, and so if you look at Amazon and you look at Netflix, these are huge successes, yet the funny piece here is that most organizations actually are really bad at this, even today. And you would expect that more organizations would kind of sort of go after this. And so I have this little example. So if you Google flights to London or flight to London, two links pop up. The first one is a link from Iceland there, as you can see, and the second one is a link from Continental. And so let's see if you click on the Iceland Air link. So what you get is something like this. And so you can immediately see, it figured out I want to go to London, so it pre-selected London as my destination in multiple different places. It showed me a nice image of London. I think that's very nice to do. But it also knows that I was doing the search from Boston. And so they pre-filled in Boston. Seems pretty straightforward, don't you think? And so, but they nail it, right? They do a good job. But so now let's look at Continental, which is also a very large airline, lots of money. You would think they have access to the latest and the greatest technology to really, get this. And so, of course, what you get is something like this. So no Boston, no London, and instead they're trying to upsell me a credit card in 2 locations, even before I bought anything. So, and this is very much the state of the web today. Like most organizations, despite some huge examples, Amazon, Netflix, most people just don't get it yet. Well, it's proven to work. So again, it's all about the right content, the right place, at the right time, or context. And so context really drives engagement. That's what it comes down to. And there's a lot of things you can do to get the right context. I mean, the obvious ones are geography, where you are, like, searching from Boston, going to London. Past behavior, Amazon, Netflix, that's really what they do. Intent, it's like, I want to go to London, so they kind of capture that from the search query. Device, but then in more extreme cases, you could, take into account time of day or temperature. Like, for example, if you guys were to go to Amazon, they may want to suggest warm jackets for your pub crawl instead of like shorts, right? And so these kinds of things, makes a lot of sense to start taking these into account as well. So, so how would you do this? Like, how does Iceland there do this, really? And so the way they do it is they combine a bunch of different tools, really. And so, this is a little Drupal-centric, but it doesn't have to be Drupal. But basically, the trick is you need to attract people to your website. There's a lot of different ways to do that. You need to convert them, drive them to some sort of transaction, and then analyze what worked and what didn't work and kind of make that better. And to do a really good job of all these things, you need all of these different tools. You need mobile support and social support, but you need to integrate with your CRM and email campaign software and e-commerce package and a personalization engine and marketing automation tools. How many people know marketing automation tools? All right, some people do. So in short, marketing automation tools like Marketo, these kinds of tools, what they do is they try to learn from your behavior. And so based on what you do on a website, they will put you in a bucket. They'll segment the audience, and they'll say, for example, if people come to the Alfresco website, I don't know if you guys use Marketo or something, but they'll, or if you come to Acquia.com, we'll try to figure out whether you're a developer, like if you're interested in technical content on our website, or whether you're interested in, say, business topics, like use cases, these kinds of things. And then, we segment users, and we'll try to learn from that, so then next time you come, we'll give you more of the business content in case you are a business user, or more of the developer content if you're a developer, right? So there's a bunch of tools in the market that help do these things. And that combined with personalization allows websites to become more personalized. And so you need all of these tools, and there is a bunch of tools out there today. Adobe CQ5, Sitecore, Oracle, these kinds of tools. What do they have in common? Well, they all claim to do this out of the box today. Reality is there's a lot of vaporware still, but they are all working towards this vision as well, right? And so some call it, web experience management. That's what Oracle decided to call it, or WEM, which I think is one of the more commonly used names today. Adobe calls it customer experience management. Gartner calls it online channel optimization. So they came up with all sorts of fancy names, right? Or digital experience management. But I like to think of it as just digital. I mean, I think this is where things will go, right? And so, for us, being a CMS vendor, we kind of have to skate to where the puck will be. And so, away from being just a traditional CMS to, a WEM system, if you will. And that means a number of different things, but it means we need to, integrate with other systems or provide that kind of functionality out of the box. And so, again, it's no longer enough to simply manage content, right? We need to manage and integrate the entire digital experience of people coming to our websites. And so the couple of ways that people are trying to get there today, some are building complete suites. Adobe's and the Oracles and the Sitecores, that's what they're doing today. They have like a suite approach, and you buy a package. It's very expensive. Like Adobe, I think the average deal size for this suite is $2.6 million. So it's not cheap. And frankly, they don't actually work very well. So they're not a great solution. There's a lot of broken pieces to that. And so I believe there has to be a better way, because a lot of time the proprietary solutions, they're too slow to evolve. We see a lot of that. They're inflexible. They don't provide the right APIs. So if you want to make a change or an extension, you're unable to do so. They're very fragmented. Also very hard to integrate. Like, I don't know if you guys try to do this, but we see a lot of frustration in the market trying to integrate it. And last but not least, they're crazy expensive, right? And so there has to be a better way. And I truly believe that open source is the better way. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. First of all, integrated solutions are also a better way. Like if you look at the technology landscape in the marketing suite, it looks like this. So as you can see, there's a lot of different tools out there. And it's kind of crazy not to use these. And especially because a lot of organizations already have these tools installed. And so, Forrester actually did a survey, and they said, one of the questions that they asked was, which of the following would you like to see included in the same stack as your CMS? And so they gave a bunch of options, which you can see on the screen, and 35%, most of the people said none of these. And so the reason they said none of these is because they actually really prefer a best-of-breed solution. Like, they don't want a suite. They already have email software. They already have some sort of CRM system. They already have their analytics tool. Like, they don't want to retool the entire kitchen, right? They just want to have all these things work together. And so open source, in my opinion, is the answer to this. And you guys know open source, but as you know, the 4 freedoms of open source: the freedom to run the program, you can download it, you can look at it, there's a freedom to study the program, you can modify the program, you can make additions to it, fix bugs, and then you can also share these changes. And so what happens in open source projects is that actually creates a very large community, right? Well, first of all, there's an advantage to open source in that it's free, but free in itself is not really what's compelling about open source. I think we've long passed that stage. But what's really interesting about open source is that the other 3 freedoms, the freedom to look at the source code and make changes and to share those changes, they actually lead to collaboration. It encourages people to work together. Collaboration leads to community, and community leads to innovation. And that's, in our case, in the case of Drupal, that's why we win. We win because we actually have the better technology. We don't win because we're free. And we win because we have the better technology, because we have thousands of people helping to improve Drupal. And they've created 15,000 modules together. And so a module could be a forum module or a blogging module. So imagine 15,000 modules. A lot of these are integrations with these different systems. And so, you know, example integrations are Salesforce and Sugar CRM integrations and NetSuite, MailChimp and ExactTarget, you know, and the list goes on and on. We also, you know, integrate with Alfresco as an example. So e-commerce integrations, marketing automation integrations, and so forth. And so I think open source actually can play a key role in making these things happen. And I think, to be self-critical, I think in many ways I feel like we're in the early days of, say, photography. I just picked one thing. But this is an image of what they call the photographic apparatus. It's one of the first, you know, cameras, I guess. And it looks a little complicated, and in fact, it is a little complicated. So I looked up and I found the manual. There's a lot of text with this as well, but this is how you make a photo with this photographic apparatus. So as you can see, it involves, you know, multiple people, many different steps to develop a photo, right? Chemicals, like it's really, really complex to make a photo. Yet, despite all of that complexity, people saw the potential of taking photos. And so it took off, right? So photography took off despite all the complexity of putting things together, if you will, and making a photo. And that's, I feel like, where we are a little bit with the technologies that we presented. They kind of work, but you need to put them together, and it takes many different steps. And so along came Kodak. Everybody knows Kodak, right? And so I found this image, and actually one of their taglines for many, many years, and I don't know if it was there till the end, was, "You press the button, we do the rest." That's kind of brilliant, because they looked at this problem and they said, that's crazy that it takes so many steps and people. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make it easy for organizations to make photos. So that's what they did. Actually, and let me go back, because what's also interesting is they used sort of a cloud model in a way, if you think about it. So the way they used to work, if I'm not mistaken, is you made a photo and then you shipped the photo to a, how do you call that in English? Like, you know, a place where they would develop the photo for you. It's like you sent your raw materials in the cloud, and back comes a developed photo. I mean, does that ring a bell? And so that's kind of an interesting, you know, analogy as well. And so anyway, they really made it easy, and they made photography accessible to many, many more people. And that's, I think, what was inspiring about the technology. Another example is music. Like, I think this is a photo from maybe the 70s or the 80s that I found. And this is what people had in their living rooms. I mean, granted, this person looks a little passionate about music, but still. There's all of these different pieces which people had to put together, and, like, you know, just a lot of space, and I'm sure a lot of interesting conversations between the partners about having this stuff in the house. And so, you know, Steve Jobs, he actually made a great quote, which is, and then you get into the problem, and you see it's really complicated, you know, like with these things. And you come up with all of these convoluted solutions, and that is sort of the middle, and that's where most people stop, and the solution tend to work for a while. But the really great person will keep on going and find the key underlying principle of the problem and come up with a beautiful, elegant solution that works. I thought it was a really good quote. And, you know, imagine that photo that I just saw, and then compare that with the iPod, right? It's like they managed to reduce all of these different things into this little device, and that's actually better because it has, like, tracks, and, you know, the sound quality is actually better. And so it's pretty amazing to look at technology, you know, and that's often how things start out. It's like a bunch of little pieces together, you know, technology, it works, and then we add features to it and all of these things, and eventually there's a maturity curve here, and every kind of technology, whether it's, you know, photography or music or whatever, it eventually becomes all about optimizing and kind of nailing the experience, right? And so, you know, this notion of you press the button, we do the rest, that kind of really stuck with me. So, so that's kind of what I'm passionate about. And, and I think that we as open source people, we really have an opportunity to change our industry. If you look at the traditional web content management systems, and John will maybe remember these, like the vignettes and the interwovens. They were expensive, right? But they were breakthrough at the time. But in a way, open source kind of replaced them. But not just open source, but still today, a lot of what open source did is we changed the market, and a lot of people are moving away from these systems because they can't keep up with the innovation and all of these things. And so I feel we also have an opportunity to do the same thing with the web experience management space. I mean, I think it is the future, and open source can really change the game and replace these expensive suite solutions. And I think it's important because they're building closed systems, accessible to only a few people with lots of money. And so I think one of the cool things about open source is that we can bring these tools to the masses. We can make it open, we can make it affordable and accessible for almost everyone. And so what's in it for me? Well, if you are a developer, Drupal developer, a developer, you actually get to work on what matters, because I think this is where things are going. We can build the future of the web together. If you're a digital agency, it's all about delivering great experiences to your customers. So this is the way to get to the next level of digital experience for your customers, and hopefully, you can do so building a sustainable business as a web development shop. For users, not just Drupal users, for users, it really allows them to shift their business to digital and hopefully become like the next Amazon or the next Netflix, right? Why not? And I think last but not least, for a lot of us, it is an opportunity to do well and to do good. If you think about all the people using open source, like, all the governments using open source, all the nonprofits that use Drupal, for example, from Amnesty to Doctors Without Borders to cancer research, all of these organizations, they use Drupal to fulfill their mission. And so by doing these things, we actually give them better tools that they can, go after all of these problems that they're going after. So I'm pretty psyched about that. And I believe that's where, we have to go from a CMS point of view. So with that, I'd like to say thank you. And I think there's time for more questions. And if there's any questions, I would be happy to answer any question. You can ask me any kind of question. It doesn't have to be about the presentation. What should Alfresco people do? That's a good question. Well, I think, one of the things which we do already today is we integrate, Drupal and Alfresco integrate, right? And I think, in my opinion, that's where things are going. You should become part of this puzzle. But other than that, it's hard for me to answer what should Alfresco do. There's a question there.
Hi. Drupal has a very collaborative and quite open development process. As CTO of Acquia and somebody who I imagine wants to drive the roadmap quite a lot, how do you find that process? Is it difficult for you to design new features and direct the project, or is it confused by all of the people that contribute to it?
That's a great question. Well, it's definitely really hard, I think. So let me give you some more information there. So I've been, so Drupal predated Acquia, right? And so one of the advantages is that I've had been the project lead of Drupal, and I'm still today, for 7 years. And so in the first 7 years, I didn't make any money with Drupal. I didn't make $1 or €1. And so I had built up a lot of credibility in doing the right thing for Drupal, to be honest. And so when I started Acquia, people gave me the benefit of the doubt that I would continue to do so. And I think we've proven that over and over again. In terms of contributing, so as I know, Acquia we're a startup. We are, I think, 430 people or something. So we're not a small startup, but we're still a startup, of which we have maybe 70 engineers, let's say. Of these 70 engineers, we have a bunch that contribute to Drupal, but very few. We only have 4 or 5 people that contribute to Drupal full-time, or maybe 5 or 6. And so if you put that in the big picture, I just mentioned Drupal 8. We had over 2,000 people that not only submitted a patch, but also got their patches accepted. Like, a lot of people don't get their patches accepted. So in the big scheme of things, Acquia, while we're the biggest contributor to Drupal, we're still only responsible for maybe 5% or less. I don't actually have accurate data, but we're only responsible for a relatively small amount of the total contributions going into the project. So with that in mind, my role as a project lead, I wear multiple hats, is still very much to inspire the community to go in a particular direction. And I mean, I can't force the community to go that way. And so what I do is, it's a big part of my job, is to try to explain, well, first of all, to listen to everybody, from users to developers to Drupal shops, to basically everyone that I can listen to, and try to figure out what they want. And I try to bring all these pieces together, along with my personal opinion of where the web is going, and sort of lay out a vision and a roadmap for the project. But it's very much, it's all built on inspiring people to go there. And they have so far. So that's been a successful strategy, but it's hard, right? Because it's a very large volunteer community. It's not like I can tell people what to do, and if they don't do what I tell them to do, they kind of get fired, if you will. So yeah, it's hard, but it's working well at the same time. So I don't know if that answers your question. Try to answer it. And I think we're very unique in that, by the way. I think most open source companies are not community-led. I think only probably Linux and Drupal are truly, in my mind, community-led open source projects. Most others, like Alfresco, they have successful communities, but they're still primarily corporate-driven or corporate-led. And it's not a bad thing. It's a different approach. Both have their advantages and disadvantages, right? I'm sure, the Alfrescos of the world, sometimes they would love to have a bigger community to get more innovation from that community. Like, they don't like the fact that they have to do the majority of the work always. But there's also advantages to it, because you have more control over the direction of the project. So these are the balances that you have to work with. So, and again, neither is right or wrong. I think both are valid approaches. And it's really hard to build a community, frankly, and that's really the challenge. And we had an advantage because we had a 7-year head start, if you will, as Acquia before we started Acquia. So in many ways, the community was already there. So, more questions? No more questions? How much time do we have left? 7 minutes? You can ask me anything. Oh, there's a question. Like, a while ago, I was at an event in New York, and the question was, what hair product do you use? Oh, yeah. There was a question in the back. No?
So 2 questions. First question is so Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 is a very large migration. I'm curious how you bring a community through those sort of transitions without fragmenting it.
It's a little kicking and screaming, to be honest. So yeah, so let me give you a little bit of background. So Drupal 7 is the current version, Drupal 8 is the next version. And we pretty much rewrote Drupal from scratch. I think there's only 35% of the original code left. And we felt that was necessary to make some big changes. And like even what in your minds will be very, logical changes, but like Drupal 7 was still primarily procedural code, right? And so it's kind of like, outdated in a way. Although Drupal 7 is a great platform, very flexible, extremely well adopted. People love it. They're absolutely passionate about it. One of our biggest challenges was to attract more talent into the project. Like our growth outpaced our ability to find more talent. And that's one of the things that's holding Drupal back, is not enough people that are Drupal experts. And so that was one of the key reasons why we decided in Drupal 8 to completely flip, if you will, to proceed in an object-oriented approach using modern design patterns. A lot of the things that others had adopted years ago. That's a very big change for some people, because we have a good chunk of our community. Drupal is kind of sort of their first exposure to programming. They got into the web, they wanted to build a website. They started out as weekend hackers, if you will, sort of cobbling together websites, and then it got better and better and better, and eventually these they're not professional Drupal people. That's how they make their living, but they don't always necessarily know object-oriented programming, as one example, and there's many other examples, and so it's a very big transition, we do whatever we can to help them, from building tools to help them automatically update their modules. Like as input, you give a Drupal 7 module, the output is Drupal 8 module that doesn't work, but it kind of converted a lot of the things for you, so it gives you a head start. To doing training and tutorials, and we'll be writing books. We'll do a lot of different things to get these people to move along. Migration tools, so it's a huge effort, huge, because we have, let's say, we have 100,000 developers. How do we train 100,000 people on Drupal 8? So that's the challenge that we have. So, and it takes many different techniques, everything we can find, basically, from online training, in-person classroom-style training, to, for example, one of the things we do is we have Drupal camps. These are local events organized by people in local Drupal communities. We have about 3 or 4 camps every weekend around the world in major cities. And a camp will get about 200 people to the biggest ones, 1,400 people will show up at these camps. And so we have developed materials that people will, deliver at these camps, and people can join and ask questions. And so it's a very grassroots, organized way of training all these people. So, sorry, long answer. John?
Okay, so being community-led, you've tried a number of different business models with Acquia, and to monetize, because ultimately as a corporation, you got to make money, and so do we. And so being corporate-led, it kind of makes the services model, and support model specifically, a bit easier. So you've tried a couple things, and we see other communities like Hadoop, create things like Hortonworks and Cloudera and whatever. I'm just wondering if you've had any thoughts or thought about the business model. And if you were starting out today, with a brand new open source project, how would you approach it? And just one little bit on top of that, what license would you use?
Oh, wow. All right, let me start with the first part of the question. So maybe for people that don't know Acquia, I can spend a minute telling you what we do. So, we're basically, when I started the company in 2007, along with Jay Batson, the vision was to help large organizations, enterprises, be successful with Drupal. And we kind of copy-pasted, if you will, the traditional open source business model. And I say traditional between air quotes because there's only maybe a dozen open source companies that have made it to a certain point. But most companies did, and still do, I believe, is they had a network product. And so the Red Hat network, which was basically a combination of tools and support, manual support, SLA-based commercial grade support. So Red Hat at the Red Hat network, MySQL at the MySQL network, JBoss, I believe, at the JBoss network. So it was kind of the model. And so when we started Acquia, we had the Acquia network. And it was a combination of support and commercial proprietary tools around it. And so that's still a big piece of our business. So that's what we started with. And it's the biggest piece of our business today. And so that's been working for us. But then a couple years into Acquia, we realized that it's not easy to build a network product. Like one of the challenges is the stickiness is not always super high. So we wanted to have very high renewal rates. And some people need support when they're building their project. But then once a project is built, they don't necessarily need to support anymore. There's a category of customers. And so we felt that affected our renewal rates. And so we started looking. Although that business is working, it's not an easy one, let's say. So then we started looking for other business opportunities. And so we came up with Acquia Cloud, basically. We figured every website needs hosting. And there's also a couple of pain points with large websites. In that, we know Drupal scales. And we had scaled Drupal, but the number of people that could actually scale it were small because there's like, 1,000 little knobs, right? Every layer of the stack needs to scale. And so our vision was, if we build a hosting product, Acquia Cloud, and we specialize in build, in that being highly available, provide elasticity, and all of these things, we can actually help Drupal grow in the enterprise and also make money. And we figured it would also be a sticky business. And so we built that, and that had proven to be true. And so right now, we have a support business and a Acquia Cloud business. And it's much more than a hosting business, actually. So there's two versions. There's a platform as a service version, and there's a software as a service version of our business. And what we provide is not just hosting. We built everything on Amazon, but we've built a pretty thick layer of tools on top of that. We provide customers like staging environments and QA tools and load testing tools and uptime testing tools. Like there's, we call it an application life management suite, basically, that we provide together with the hosting. And so that's what we call Acquia Cloud, and that's how we sell it. It's like a package, I guess. And that's been proven to work really well as well. So that's kind of the two main businesses that we have in terms of products. And then we have some professional services as well. And I'll say it's hard, but it's been working. So I don't know if that answers your question. I can repeat the question if you want.
Yeah. Is it okay? Yeah. So I was just wondering if you looked at all the different business models, like the Cloudera model, and our model. It looks like you started with something kind of similar to our model as well. And it was like, how would you do it if you were starting again today? And then what license would you use?
Yeah. So I think one of the key things that's different between Alfresco and Drupal is that you guys have a dual licensing model, right? And we don't. And I don't know, it's hard to tell, but I feel like it might be easier with a dual licensing model to monetize things. Because in our case, there's only one version of Drupal and everybody can use Drupal. Nobody has to use us. So, there's no requirement whatsoever. So people need to come to us because, they really want support. But they get all the bug fixes and everything else without, coming to us. And so for that to succeed, I think we need massive adoption. So we focused a lot on getting out there and getting Drupal adopted by millions of people. And then we only monetize a little sliver, if you will, of the total install base. Whereas I think with the dual licensing strategy, you can have a smaller base, less adoption, but you're able to monetize a much bigger portion of that. And so I have to wrap up, but I don't regret what we did. I'm actually very proud of the fact that we use sort of a pure open source strategy. But we couldn't use the dual licensing model because. Would you do it again? Yeah. I would. If I would believe I could do it again, I would do it again, because I do love the fact that we touch so many people, and that we have millions of websites on Drupal. But it's really hard and takes a really long time. So I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. So we have two projects actually. We have Alfresco and Activity. Are you all done?
He's trying to shut us down, but all right. We'll talk more.
All right, let's everybody give Dries a round of applause. Thank you very much, Dries. Appreciate it, man.